Hi. So recently, I'm pretty sure you guys have all heard of members of Congress asking and instituting that we invoke the 25th Amendment to get, Trump out of office. And there are a lot of people out there, the common folk that thinks that Congress has the power of impeachment and invoking the 25th. Well, part of it is kind of true, but some of it is also wrong. So for today, I'm going to kind of briefly read the entirety of the 25th Amendment and kind of briefly go over what each part means. There's only 4 sections, but section 4 is the main one we want to focus on for today. So, as a quick brief generalization, the 25th Amendment was ratified on February 10th of 1967, just, a few years after JFK was assassinated. All right, so just quickly going over here. I have it here on my little booklet of the Constitution. So yeah, we're going to read the 25th Amendment and briefly go over each little aspect of it, just in general. Section 1, in case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Now, the main thing about this one is that, yes, it is the most simplified part of the amendment, but technically it already has happened before it was ratified. 8 times in 1841, 1850, 1865, 1881, 1901, 1923, 1945, and 1963. Yeah, with either assassinations or natural deaths of, 8 different presidents. 4 of assassinated and 4 of natural cause. Yeah, they're both evenly split. The next one that would technically be under that part would have been in 1974 when Nixon resigned and his VP, Ford, became president. But we'll get to that here right now, actually. Section 2. Whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take office upon confirmation by a majority vote in both houses of Congress. So that one's also pretty simple. Basically, obviously the vice president can technically serve however long he or she wishes. But, sometimes the vice president might resign or in most cases die in office. When that happens, obviously the president has to nominate someone in order to become the next vice president. With the passage of this, it's only happened once, and it was in late December of 1973. Richard Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, resigned due to his involvement in Watergate. And so the nomination of Gerald Ford went over to the Senate, in which he was confirmed over there. And then it went over to the House of Representatives, and they also voted to confirm him. And so Gerald Ford was sworn in as vice president immediately after the House voted to confirm him and was sworn in the House chamber. And that is the only time that has ever happened since the passage of this amendment. Prior to that, the president would just leave that spot, unfilled until either the next term or for the next person to come in to become president. All right, Section 3. Whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and of the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, those are the key words there, and until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. Now, this has technically happened quite a few times, but it generally is only at least most of the time for today's use, only when the president has to have some form of a medical procedure of some sort. More recently, I believe it was in November of 2021, Biden had to do that for, for Amendment 25, Section 3. And he wrote it to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. And yeah, Kamala was temporary acting president while Biden was busy getting a colonoscopy. So it happens sometimes, but not too often. It usually lasts for either like a day or two, or at most a couple hours. And the main part, Section 4. Section 4, again, is broken down into two parts. So we're going to do the first part here real quick. Section 4, Clause 1. Whenever the Vice President and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the Vice President shall immediately assume powers and duties of the office as acting president. So, that one is a little complicated because it doesn't really specify. It technically says either or, but for this case, let's say that it's the cabinet. So I would assume it would be the vice president leading at least a simple majority of the cabinet, advisors, of the 15 main cabinet advisors. Since there are 15, a simple majority would be 8. Meaning at least 8 of them have to be in favor along with the vice president and say, hey, the president is not, is unable to fulfill his duties. And with that, that means that the vice president becomes acting president. But as we go into Clause 2, thereafter, when the president transmits to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office unless the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide transmit within 4 days to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. We're going to stop right there for just a sec. So basically that little part means that the president can challenge it and give his declaration to both leaders of Congress within 4 days that, no inability exists. And if the cabinet in this scenario were to say, yes, it does exist, they have to reaffirm that to both of the leaders of Congress. So what happens if that were to happen? Thereupon, Congress shall decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session. If the Congress, within 21 days after receipt of the letter written declaration, or if Congress is not in session within 21 days after Congress is required to assemble, determines by 2/3 vote of both houses that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall continue to discharge the same as acting president. Otherwise, the president shall resume the powers and duties of his office. So that little bit means that after the president challenges it and the cabinet body in this scenario reaffirmed that yes, that is happening, then the timer begins for Congress, and it all technically lies on Congress. So they have 21 days to kind of figure it out, while also trying to, assemble within 2 days. Uh, if they decide before the 21-day timer ends, in a 2/3 majority that it does exist, then that means the vice president is permanently acting president, at least until the next election cycle. But they could technically let the time run out. And if they do let the time run out, then all power goes back to the president. Yeah, I know, it's kind of complicated, but that's the best way I can easily explain it to you. Now, when it comes to the other part, for the congressional committee, or of some sort of congressional body designated by Congress, uh, it's unknown how exactly that would fully play out. I don't know. I don't know if they would bring up some kind of independent, non-congressional like group. That way they designate all that power to, or they want to create a committee themselves with a lot of like high-ranking members of the House, or members of both houses of Congress, to like meet and kind of figure out what to do. I don't know. All I know is that this territory is pretty difficult to explain fully because it technically never happened. Although the last time that this was threatened was during the Biden administration, mainly because of the Republicans were like, "Oh, Sleepy Joe," but yeah, tables have turned. It's now on Demented Cheeto Man. Because, I mean, we all know. We all know. So, that's all we have for now. I just want to kind of briefly go over the 25th Amendment and simplify it as much as I possibly can. I might have gotten a thing or two wrong, but, just take it with a grain of salt. But, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.